A busy florist gave up her Saturday to debate here. So I appreciate that. And so Joseph here, I just introduced Joseph Varga. We did an interview in Ukraine on TV, and he did most of the speaking, so it's not my fault. And they put the story up in 4 different stations, and the story begins with Kenneth Glover started going to Ukraine, and he inspired Joseph to join him. And the fact is that on February 22nd, 2022, February 24th, I should know this. What day? 24th. February 24th, 2022, he came downstairs into the living room in his FedEx uniform, and he choked out the words that they've invaded, and they're not expected to last long. And we knew that was Ukraine. And he wept, and for Joseph, if I can speak for him, it was more than just an invasion. Joseph knows what it's like to be under Russian occupation. At age 21, he hid in some bushes at a bend in a railroad track in his town that was near Austria. No Hungarian could go there unless they lived in the town. It was easier to escape from Chopranus, where the people filed out of Eastern Europe after 1989, the changes through his town. And his brothers had wanted to escape with him as well, but they always said, maybe not today. He washed his ID, his state ID, in his clothing and his shirt, his pant pocket. He had to go in with a disintegrated ID to the police station, and they kept him there for hours and berated him and threatened to throw him into prison, a work camp for destroying government property. Make sure you get the star on your license, by the way, just is coming up in May, your mass ID. So, but they'll give you a new one at our registry without threatening to put you in prison. And he had experienced enough of Hungary under Russia. And so he crouched down in some bushes by a bend in the track, an armed soldier at the front of the train, an armed soldier at the back of the train. And he leapt for the space between 2 cars. He held on, and he was not seen, and he rode into Austria, and he gave himself up at the police station. And they put him in what was the camp they put you in?
It's a refugee camp, it's a tri-skirt camp. It's actually was open up for Afghanistan when Russia invaded Afghanistan, so it was not a refugee. So it was 6 months I stayed in the refugee camp in Vienna. So applied to come over to the US.
Yeah. So when that morning when Joseph was weeping, it's because he knew what would happen to all these millions of people who currently are in possession of liberty. Thank you, Joseph. Joseph inspires me. So I can officially begin the talk. So an update from Ukraine by Kenneth and Joseph. There's a photograph here of Joseph and myself and Balazs Troutman with some boots, and I'll get to that story. So I guess we'll go forward. All right. Inspiration of the Ropes Mansion Garden, Salem, Massachusetts. So I run a tour in Salem, historical. Enough about that. And one day, either late August or early September, I was walking with a tour group, and we were in the garden, Ropes Mansion, nearby. And a local came up and talked about what Joseph and I do. At the end of my tour, which ended there that day, a gentleman, we'll call him Thomas, came up to me and he says, I'm a weapons contractor. And my friends and I have been looking for a way to support Ukraine through something just like what you do. Now, we didn't have a lot of lead time to make something bigger happen. But what we did expanded Joseph and I's understanding. This is not something we thought we could have done 3 years ago. Thomas and I spoke, and he decided he wanted to get his military weapon contractor friends and colleagues involved with us. And he says, I'd like to buy winter boots for the soldiers in Ukraine. We can send them through a military base in Germany at an APO address. Who can we send them to? And would we now need paperwork to bring them into Ukraine? The answer is yes. Humanitarian aid must be associated with paperwork. It is a difficult process. We can fly under the radar with a few things in our bags, but boots might be different. So I called up my friend, our friend in Ukraine, Tibor Tompa, who a week ago was filming. You'll see him later. Here. And Tibor says, I have 2 people in Budapest who can help you with that. So one of them returned our call, Mr. Troutman, as you saw. And we arranged that if he received boots, he would do the paperwork, and he could even deliver them if there was too many. Ultimately, they were 5 pairs of boots at a value of $200 a piece that are now on the feet of soldiers fighting in the winter in Ukraine. So there it is, the garden. Joseph's humanitarian van. Joseph bought a Mercedes. Joseph, and truth be told, if we didn't or have no interest in Ukraine, Joseph and I could have 2 brand new vehicles in the driveway, but ours still work, just like our Liberty. Joseph's humanitarian van, it's been decorated. There's an elephant here, and it says in Ukrainian, they Russian to help. One moment on that. Here's the van being used prior to our January trip. Our friend Adriana and Arturo, who I'll speak about a little bit later, drove out to a Roma village. Roma community is not a community that's always treated very well in Europe. To a little church, and we sent about $500, and it was at a time when we really didn't have funds because we hadn't raised very much. But I had sold a few tours on Venmo, and I said, if we spend the money, more money will come. And so that's what $500 spends in food. Food is expensive there like it is here. We're on the road, and here's a picture of it in the garage. We have that moment too. And, oh, by the way, they rush him to help. An absolute lie. Joseph and I, Adriana and Arturo, all of us are always late. But we try. Next.
Is the van garaged in Ukraine?
Yeah, the garage is Ukraine, a place called Kolomia, and it's rear-wheel drive, and it's not automatic, and Joseph and I, neither of us can drive it. I think he doesn't want to, I can't. And so Arturo had to do all the driving, and there was a problem with the sensor at some point, and we were told it was dangerous to drive in the snow. And guess what happens in January? It snows. And we ended up driving anyways. It's fine, it's fixed now. The American Embassy, you might notice the double arches of the American Embassy, otherwise known as McDonald's, up there. And Arturo and Adriana in the summer. Arturo likes to make goofy faces. He's been a prisoner of war. Started fighting in 2014. I had to do the math. He's 33 just the other day, and he was tortured. On an earlier talk, what can I say? But on one talk, I even showed his x-ray. 14 teeth have been pulled out of his head with pliers by Wagner, and 2 teeth broken. And over 2 successive trips, we paid for the dental work directly to a dentist in a hospital that did the work for no profit, just at cost. And now he has a full set of teeth. I don't know if I should say it. I'll just say that someone else wanted to take credit for the work we did with Arturo's teeth. And when a reporter came all the way from Kyiv, hundreds of miles away, to do a not investigative, they should have, when they wanted to, how should I say it, do a personal interest story on an organization that had fixed his teeth. Arturo sent the reporter away. He says, Kenneth Glover fixed my teeth, and I'll not give you a story. And Adriana, they're engaged. And she is our logistics person, our organizer, our phone call maker, and our parkladach, our interpreter. And she is our friend. Next. As is Arturo. So I'm going to play this as a children's concert. Korotnyane, Ukraine. I made that sound like I know how to pronounce it. January 5th, 2025 is a special concert the children threw for Joseph and I. And Joseph bought them a Christmas tree so they could have something nice before we got there. And he sent Arturo and Adriana all over in the van to buy chocolate Santa Clauses and each child. And some of them are from very poor families, others broken families because of the war. And each child got a box of chocolates and sweets. And then we went to see them at the concert. And let's just play that. Oh, I'll talk. The concert was beautiful. It was in a very intimate space. And at first I was a little self-conscious being so close to people performing. And then I realized something. Children needed Joseph and I to look at them. They were there to be seen and supported. Here it is. One piece. 2 hours. Supportive person. I've broken this up into small stories. Is that a second video? She's singing her song. She was out quite a bit, and at one of a solo she had, she was looking right at Tatiana, really terrified to look at the audience. She stumbled with some of her words, and I remembered when I was a child I hadn't learned my lines in a play, and the boy next to me did learn the lines. We were gingerbread men. And he spoke very softly. No one saw his lips moving. I repeated everything he said. I got accolades for remembering all my lines. And I didn't know why. It was her and one other little girl about the same age. And there was just some quality about them. And I said, they need my eye contact more than any of the other children. And I made sure that I made eye contact with each child in the performance so they knew I appreciated it. Joseph is naturally good at this. And I said to Adriana, these two girls here, there's something unique about them. They needed attention. They needed to be seen more than the other children. And the little girl that you just saw, her father was killed in the war. And I had thought to myself, I don't know if she has a father to come to her play. And the other little girl, her father is missing. So simple things like this are important. So, Ambassador, I follow you on Facebook. Never, never let this be your opening salvo to a state official. Chasing them across a parking lot at a popular restaurant. This is Ambassador Shandor, Fedio Shandor. Fedio Shandor is known as a professor. He's a university teacher, and Andriana was one of his many thousands of students. And when the war began, all-out war, 2022, he was fighting in the trenches and teaching class from his computer in the trenches. And he was appointed to be the Ukrainian ambassador to Hungary. He's a native Hungarian speaker. He's from Transcarpathia, Western Ukraine. And I've been following him on Facebook. And we went to a restaurant of Joseph choosing. And Joseph says, oh my goodness, look who came in. I said, who? The ambassador, Fedio Shandor, is here. He walks in with two security people, and they look through the entire room of the restaurant and assess the other people at the table before they sit to have a conversation. The story I heard later about Shandor, because I got to know him from one of his colleagues, Balazs Troutman, is that one time they were having a meeting in a restaurant, he and a team of people. And he says, hey, let's go outside and have a cigarette. Now, you follow them out, you might be wondering why we're out here having a cigarette. They were not in Ukraine. He says, the table to the right were Russian Secret Service. The table to the left were Ukrainian Secret Service. And I'd rather keep this between us. And so he's in the restaurant. I really want to talk to him. Says, Adriana, will you introduce us? But not during the meal. That would be so American. And at the end of the meal, it didn't work out that way. Adriana had gone to the lavatory. Joseph was back. And he was leaving the restaurant. And the opportunity was passing. And I just suddenly had this feeling that it's okay. He'll want to be my friend. So I chased him out into the parking lot. I put my bag down by the van because I didn't want him to think I was going to blow myself up. He did have security with him. I did feel a little intimidated that they might do more than mace me. Well, I wanted to be respectful of the fact that people want to kill him. So I put my bag down. I chased him through the parking lot. He was, Ambassador! Ambassador! He turns around cautiously. I says, I follow you on Facebook. I thought, great start. It is working. So I walked over to him. Joseph was sort of coming up in the rear, a little slow, and like, I don't know where this is going. And I said, well, Ambassador, last Sunday, I was in such and such a village, and I was at a Catholic mass. Your friend, the priest, was giving the mass. And I know this other person, Balazs Troutman, from, what's the organization? It's in Hungary, and they collect things that are useful for the soldiers in the front lines. And so I do this talk, and the blah, 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 blah. He says, nice to meet you. He speaks English. And so I introduce Joseph, and we start to talk, and Andriana and Arturo come out, and we're standing, it's starting to rain light, and he sends one of the security to his vehicle to get a bag, and he gives us some patches, chevron patches, in exchange. And then he said, when you're back in the region, I want you to come to the embassy for coffee. Oh, if you're going to do that, you're going to need my phone number. And I'll need yours. So out in the parking lot, we exchanged phone numbers. He said, do you need me to spell my name? I said, no. No, Ambassador, I don't need you to spell your name. I've been following you on Facebook. And I told him it's raining. If you want to go, it's okay. He says, I'll see you back in the region. We'll have coffee. And they went off. And at the end of the trip, I make a donation of $860, some of it from you, for Hungarian language books for that region of Ukraine that's Hungarian speaking. Because personally, I believe that a country can have more than one language. And these are books going to be for children, new books with new ideas and not the backwards ideas of the current administration in Hungary. And I wanted to strengthen that relationship because I am going to have coffee with him, as is Joseph. And there might be a garden party. Balazs Troutman at the end of the trip had said, you know, the ambassador would like me to have a party at my house. I don't think my house is the right place to have a garden party. I says, oh yes it is. Why do you say that? Well, I was looking at your house on Google Maps, and you've got a nice wall around it and some pine trees, and I think it looks lovely for a garden party. Huh. By the way, how are you going to have coffee with the ambassador? Have you already had it? He said first. I says, no, next time we're here. Balazs Troutman says, well, how are you going to do that? Well, they gave me his phone number. At that moment, Balazs lurched across the table and says, what? I work with a man, he won't give me his phone number. Truth is, Andriana knew that. She said after I got the phone number, she says, Ken, that's something. He's known for not giving out his phone number. He's very close with it, and you didn't ask for it. And so I feel like I've done something good. I talk in big stories, Sarah. All right. Mission Impossible. Visit Baba Lita. So there's a woman here, it's a little small, she's wearing a really bright outfit. Baba Lita means grandmother Lita, and she is from the East, and she's a Russian woman. She married a Hungarian, and she doesn't know why the Russians had to start this war. And she is an internally displaced refugee, a person, IDP, internally displaced person in Ukraine. And we gave the money for a pizza party. But the first thing that happened when we got there, she said, you look tired, Ken. And she made me lie down in bed. And we did a little shopping trip. The first shopping trip, I was sleeping. The second trip, Joseph says, get out of bed. We need someone to carry stuff. I was tired.
Oh my goodness, it's so good to see you.
So you can see we have a lot of fun. So it was really hard, logistically, to visit Baba Lita because we had a really full schedule. We always do. And we were really shaving hours to go visit her. But I said, I can't go to Ukraine and not see Baba Lita. Here's the thing, there's a little transference. She looks like my mother.
Oh.
She's my mother's age. If my mother was alive, I look like her son. I'm the same age as her son. If her son was alive, there's a lot of transference going on there. But I think it's a fine reason to love someone.
It is.
Right. And a van full of Christmas. So the van became something that transported joy. We sent our tour and Andriana all over to get chocolates. Now this picture here in the corner, these are some chocolates we picked up on our way from Hungary to Ukraine in the van. They came and picked us up. And these chocolates we bought with some of the money that Joan, right here in the center of the couch, gave us for the children. And she said, this is money, I want you to spend it on the children. And here's some of the Christmas boxes and Lieutenant Colonel on the front lines, who also I thought deserved a Christmas bag. And the balloons, only 2 children got them. The children, 2 young children of our friend Irina, I'll talk about her a little later. I just thought they were lovely. They had light up things in the balloons. And they have a little girl, and her name in English translates to gift. And our second short visit we made there in this last trip, she marched in, interrupted her father talking to me, and said, where's my gift? Because I always bring her a gift. And her mother says, Kenneth is not going to bring you a gift every time he is here. And I says, no, that's not correct. I said, of course I have you a gift. I did it, but I had bought some things and it substituted, so I brought it in. And she came out of her bedroom. I didn't want to take it, but I had to because she gave it to me. This is the Maria. Was the largest plane in the world that was in Ukraine. And this is crochet. This is one of her Christmas gifts. Her mother said she got a lot of Christmas gifts and she wants you to take it. So this Maria plane goes everywhere I do a talk because I want the little girl to see it. And she's a lovely girl.
It's sweet.
I'll pass it around.
Sweet, sweet, sweet.
Next. A van full of Christmas too. So as we traveled around, we met people. There was that time of the Christmas season, as is January. There's young men and women, youth dressing up in Russian uniforms and strange and old people and old women and young women. And one of the boys dressed as a young woman. And I gave them, we stopped, we filmed them all, and I gave bags of chocolates because we had a lot of chocolate. Bags of chocolates and stuff and some money, and they really loved it. Arturo dressed as Santa Claus before we could get to the little music school. We also sent out art supplies to a group of really low-functioning, internally displaced people, but for their for children for some art therapy. Roman is at the music school, this little boy, he was in the play, and he walked up to Arturo and he said to Andriana, on that little tiny blow-up globe, can you tell me where in this globe Joseph and Kenneth live?
Oh.
We brought him a map. We brought him what did we bring him? A map of the world.
Yeah, one for the US, the States, and the one for the whole world.
We brought that to him later. And more gift giving and more candy. Okay. Sweet memories from Columbia.
This is Joseph's video.
Joseph's video. Joseph makes good videos.
It is.
Yeah. My wife is into it.
Her name is Paula. She's a director of this volunteer center, and she's beloved. It's a good luck thing. Some children with developmental disabilities, adults. We're in front of the People's House. We're holding the flag, Ukrainian flag, with the emblem of the People's House, the volunteer center. They make fine netting to capture drones so it doesn't kill people, it disables them, stops them from exploding. We're at a home of aged people who are living out the last weeks and months of their lives, some of them. And I sang a song for them, they sang for me. And we went room to room giving out bananas and tangerines and meringues. They don't often have the money for sweet treats. They enjoyed the visit. And this is one of the outreaches that the People's House in Columbia does. So war is also about people who normally would be struggling anyways. And we went to a trip to the museum in Columbia. This is the, I think it's the Loshenka Museum. We didn't go there. We went to a history museum. We fed, took care of dogs, homeless dogs, hundreds of them. All right, so Columbia was one of the places Joseph looked up and adopted as a place to help out. They make bulletproof vests. They make a collapsible, just basically cloth carrying bags for soldiers when they're injured and they have to be transported. Fish netting to capture drones that's invisible to the drone operators. And they produce large camouflage nets that cover like a 40 by 40 space. And they didn't have a vehicle to transport those things. They're always borrowing vehicles. Next. And the People's House, Columbia. And these are a group of young people who got chocolates and sweets and tangerines. Thank you, Joan. And others here. And here they are. And I'm talking with one of the volunteers. If you could see the picture a little closer, I tell you, he is the most attentive man. He's smiling from the inside. It's clear to me he loves Hala very much. He's one of those benevolent leaders that leads, but also works intensely with the people she's working with and doesn't demand, but gets the respect of everyone who loves her. Everyone has their enemies, though. And Andriana taught me how to take pictures from an angle to make the things we were giving look like there was as much as there was there. I was taking pictures that made it look less. So, and here is me in a very highly fashionable ghillie suit, which I didn't want to wear long because a soldier is going to want that, and that is a uniform for a sniper. But that's each knot is made by hand of each little piece of fabric, and ladies work on that around the clock. And at that People's Center. Okay. Second picture is just the volume of stuff they put out. These children with Down syndrome and intellectual disabilities, and they're utilizing their van because here's something you don't know, but you might be suspecting. One night we're sitting around a table after a long day with Hala and some other people at the center, and she happens to say, "We've been praying for a van." And my head whipped around so fast to Joseph. I said, "Did you hear that?" And I said, "It's not automatic. We don't like to drive it." And we were in it for 3,000 miles on this trip in the 2 and something weeks. We really got tired of the van. And I said, "It could answer a lot of prayers." In fact, some people had believed that the van, we had bought it for Arturo and Andriana, and were accusing them of fraud. And so Andriana and Arturo were getting a lot of heat for having the van in their driveway. The sad irony was we were going to donate the van to the person that was giving them the heat. So we donated to Columnia instead. And so once we got all permissions on our side of the table in English, I turned to Hala and Andriana interpreted it. And I said, "We'd like to give you the van." And she went, "Ah!" And they're really using it. And they still left our names on it, Kenneth and Joseph. It should be Joseph and Kenneth. They rushed to help. Now the van makes it to places on time.
Who was giving them the hard time? That you were going to donate it?
Yeah. So
I don't know if you can say that.
it was on video and stuff.
Judicious way.
I would just I would put it delicately that perhaps if we had filled in the head of organization, if we had filled them in that the purpose of the van, rather than thinking it's nobody's business, which might not have been the best thing, and someone saw the van, head of organization, and thought that maybe Andriana was benefiting and using a relationship with us to rake in the cash. In fact, the only thing she was doing is working very hard for us for free because we're all volunteers. And so we realized that the van might have become a difficulty for her. And so it was a good moment, a boon, in fact, when Hala said, "We've been praying for a van." And I said, "Joseph, let's answer more than one prayers, hers and ours." Thanks. Plus, we're going to take the train next time. The Mechanics Bay and winter blues. So the mechanic told us with the sensor out in one of the tires, it made it around a little bit slower than the others, rear-wheel drive, also wheel-wheel drive, and without the sensor, driving the van could be fatal in the snow. And that was the weather before and after Columnia at night. But we made the van, the fingers crossed, and a lot of prayers. And that's when the storm cleared. And we decided we were at this point near Poland to go through the mountains. And then I was thinking, I hope we make it out of the mountains before the temperature plummets and we're sledding down the hill in a van it's dangerous in the snow with the sensor out. But it was a beautiful ride near the Polish border. If you want to taste our food, go and eat it at the front lines. There's a 421-pound pig, not that.
Beautiful, beautiful.
We bought for the soldiers. That's Irina. Her daughter's name is Gift, and I got her a squeaky dog toy. Pig. And because we bought her a 421-pound pig to butcher up and feed to the soldiers. We did that with some of your money.
Thank you.
You're welcome. 3 kilometers from the Russian front lines. That's 2 miles. Frontline hug day. It's a day. And Joseph and I, and look where. You're getting some patches, chevrons. So this was actually very, very dangerous. We left Kyiv early in the morning, drove for hours to within 2 miles of the front lines. We got to the post block, and we were there being scrutinized for half an hour. In fact, this man, the tall man, Lieutenant Colonel, our friend Tibby next to him, he actually came to the vehicle and stared through the open window at us for half an hour.
Oh.
And he was expecting us. Imagine if he wasn't. And he did not tell us who he was, that we were visiting him, or he would prepared for us some certificates with our names on it. But we were unknown. Tibby and his friend were known. And when we got to the other side, they asked if we wanted coffee. I wanted soup and coffee and lunch. And we were near the front lines for 2 hours, having a discussion of material needs that they needed, very much serious things. But at the post block, if I could describe it, you drive up to this area, you're forced to drive in like an S pattern, there's cement blocks and tires around you, and there's heavily armed soldiers, men and women, and they have us pull over because they're not sure of Joseph and my credentials. Not familiar with the van. It's our van. We've driven for hours to be within 10,000 feet of fighting Russians. And so we're there, and one of the, Tibby, our friend who's driven that place many times, he says, "What are you, the Ukrainian FBI?" He's pushing back to the soldier who's not sure if we can go through. And then phone calls are made. And one of the soldiers goes, "Oh, are those real American Marlboro cigarettes?" We always bring 2 cartons for Tibby. He requests them, American Marlboro Man. And in Ukraine, it's not a cigarette that's going to kill you on the front lines. And he says, "Yes, they are." And he handed the soldier a cigarette and another soldier a cigarette. What I didn't see is a little later, Tibby passed over 2 packs. Lieutenant Colonel came to the car, and he's staring, and I want to be intimidated, but then I realized this guy is not my enemy. And my job right now is to look back at him. Every time he looked away, I held my gaze. And after some portion of half an hour, he asked a question. Well, and it was in Ukrainian. And after 3 years, I've gotten to the point where I got to this point with some conversational Hungarian in the past where I didn't need it to be translated to English, but I needed someone to translate my words back into the other language. That's where I'm at with Ukrainian sometimes. And so he says in Ukrainian, "Well, did they vote for Donald Trump?" I'm not making commentary. I'm only stating the facts. "Did they vote for Donald Trump?" And Tibby says, "No, they're Democrats." Oh, what was the next question he asked? Oh, we don't want American tourists at the front lines. They're not tourists. They're not tourists. They've been coming for 3 years. And then our Lieutenant Colonel friend, staring, he looked away. He looked back at me, and I was still staring, smiling. And he went, okay, follow me. And we followed him out in his vehicle. And about some little distance away, it's good enough for public video, we come to a parking lot. And he says, follow me. Do you want coffee? And we go to a little place in the village and go through a door, and there's a warm fire in this lovely room with a bar. You can have a few drinks if you stand up at it, very Eastern European. I'm like, oh, what a lovely warm room. This is wonderful after a cold trip. Van was cold. Then we walk into the next room, that's 20 degrees cooler. Then we walk into the next room, it's even cooler than that. I'm like, ugh, fire's out there. And we began what you saw in the video, coffee and something to eat, fixed menu, and talked that they needed car parts. They needed a device that sees the distance, a distance finder. They needed other things, TV monitors, so they can use it to see what their drones are seeing, their reconnaissance drones, and other such things that seem very common to us. And then it was time to leave. And we went back to the parking lot, opened up the van, and we transferred all the goods. Now, if you understand something, understand this. We may have filled a van, and 4 of us drove to the front, while Andriana and Arturo stayed in the church all day in the Basilica in Kiev and prayed for us because they weren't sure we were going to come back alive. It really was that dangerous. We drove in on a road that we had to drive fast on. And we didn't know a few days before the trip if we were going to do the trip because Russians had nearly encroached on the road and were threatening to take the only way in and out. And that could happen while we were there, possibly. It nearly happened a few days before, but it didn't. We're traveling along the road, and so they're praying for us, and now it's time to leave. And we go through the post block. I say some sort of goodbye greeting. Everyone laughs. I butcher the language. And we're driving, and I suddenly realize that Tibi Kashpeki is driving faster than I've been driven in a car before. I think it was comparable to the time I worked at a funeral home and I wanted to see if the hearse really did make it to 100 miles an hour on 128 going to Gloucester, and the guy in the flower car was racing me. I mean, it was comparable to that. It was a speed I wasn't comfortable at, but I knew why. I felt a palpable sense of dread that any moment we were going to be dead or in some process of dismemberment. I was thinking of the drones, the killer drones. There was a tree line. Our vehicle had been parked in one spot near the front for a little more than 2 hours, enough time to be noticed and enough time for them to wait for the vehicle to go to the only way in and out. Ambulances were going in the direction we're now going, ammunition trucks going back to where we were, and we're driving fast, and Tibby breaks his silence. He says, sorry friends, I'm driving fast because it makes it harder for the drone operators to target the van. I had interpreted his sense of dread, and I knew we were safe when half an hour later we saw a speed trap. The police car and the speed trap meant that we weren't going to die. And we made it back to Kiev. And at the end of the evening, Tibby ripped open an envelope and at the Hotel Ukraine, the presence of other friends who were there to greet us after the dangerous trip. And he produced a certificate, and one for Joseph, one for me. It was, by the way, a certificate the Lieutenant Colonel gave Joseph. And I have one, but it sort of fell apart in the suitcases. Some were safe. And we both got matching diplomas. And the diploma reads, and it's associated with the medal. It's from a commander on the front lines, commander in the Ukrainian army. Glory to Ukraine diploma. These little pieces of paper are so important to people over there. Me too. for the significant personal merits in establishment, building, and dedication to ideals of Ukraine independency, fruitful military, patriotic, and social work, awarded with honorable mention. And each of us got this, and this is, awarded from a military commander. And even as a Quaker, I wear it proudly. I do like this recognition. It makes me feel good. And as a Quaker, Christian pacifist sect, I justify it. It says social work. A friend from Philadelphia and Kiev, and a friend, capital F, Quaker, Kristen Richardson. There is no need for me to fear. I guess that's a quote, and I do like that. Bayard Rustin, who was a Quaker in the Civil Rights Movement, and African American, and we were able to connect, even though our schedules got messed up by a storm. So we were there a full 24 hours partial after we could meet her. But she came back to the hotel with our friend Tibor because I thought she could benefit from meeting him. So he gave her a tour around the region to places like Bucha, etc. And she said, you can show this picture, just make sure none of my unmentionables are in the open suitcase. And they are not. And it was a pleasure, but I didn't know her before. I knew her through Kathleen, who's a Quaker, and Kathleen knew her through someone else who's a Quaker. I'd never met her that I know of, but because there's such a small society, we had to meet each other in Kiev. And that was a great meeting. I appreciate it. Thanks. I have to set something up. At the end of the trip, we'd spent thousands of dollars. We had made an impact in people, been present, psychological support, emotional support, and we were at the New York City Cafe in Budapest. I don't do a lot of fancy things, and nor does Joseph, but one indulgence when we go and we're in Hungary is to go to the New York Cafe. And the food is good, but people don't go for the food. And the food is excellent. People go for the Instagrammable photos. We spent millions of dollars doing the place up with gold leaf and a businessman and an Italian man. And they play live orchestra music and they bring food and you have multiple waiters. And most people go there for a coffee that costs 16 euro.
Wow.
It's expensive. But in Hungary right now, Hungary is open to all the Russians. They're welcome, in fact, and we met one. He came to sit at the table next to us. He wasn't any Russian. At some point, he made it full well known he was important. The moment they walked in, and they were berating the waitstaff, very demanding. Nothing could please them. They couldn't be served quick enough. Waitress, waitress. You know, it was that sort of attitude, waitress. And the young woman stopped. She says, I'm not your waitress, but I'll get one for you. Well, take my order. I'm the hostess, sir. I'm not your waitress. I will get one for you. She didn't like him. I could tell. And she kept, it was just under the surface. At some portion time there afterwards, between the beginning of the crisis and the end of the crisis, I'll describe as about an hour. Sometime in that hour, I look over at his table. Now, he wasn't necessarily my enemy, and I wasn't adversarial to him, but I knew he was adversarial to us. And he had a very large gold badge on the table. His iPhone was open up to a screensaver or a picture, and it was him in a very high-ranking Russian uniform. He was there with his wife and daughter, and they couldn't be pleased. And what unraveled in that hour was like a scene out of Casablanca. You know, Humphrey Bogart comes out of the back room, and he's looking down into Rick's place. Rick is there, and the Germans are in the corner, and Casablanca was a mixture of French and German and other people from European countries. and they're playing a patriotic Third Reich song. And Rick will have none of it. And sends a man, I think, perhaps who works for him, I'm going to see the movie again, down. And other man goes down and says to a band that's not playing, play the Messiah. Play it. And Rick Humphrey Bogart goes, gets the permission. Da na 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 na. And people stand up, and they stand up and they drown out the German song. What happens in the New York City Cafe? This lovely man here is a beautiful violinist, comes down from the orchestra at the top of the stairs. We had noticed him go around. He'd go to a table, play one song, then go up to the orchestra. After a while, didn't want to overdo it, asked for another song. He came to us and said, what would you like? Joseph, what would you like? He said to Joseph. And I answered for Joseph. I says he would like a Chardash. Hungarian songs, he played the Chardash. And he noticed that we had a Ukrainian pin and some other things. He said, where are you from? In Hungarian. And I said, well, from the United States of America. And Joseph says, and they're from Ukraine. Oh. And he walks away. Up the stairs. Well, it was very friendly. He's okay. So more like thinking. Goes up to the orchestra, confers with them. He comes down and he plays I Червоний. Now, I'm not entirely sure if that's exactly the Ukrainian national anthem, but I think it is. And he plays this beautiful national anthem. And Adriana is a little emotional. We all are. And she's weeping. Artur, the soldier, is weeping. Joseph is weeping. He has a video of me weeping. I have a video of him weeping because he was standing on either side of the violinist. Here, Joseph is filming me. Now notice, the Russian-speaking people next to us, they turn around a few times, and Joseph caught them in film. If you were to get close, if looks could kill, she would have killed us. And he looks around, not as concerned, but still in the concern rage. They ever afterwards are stomping around for the remainder of the hour, even more agitated than they were before. And some many minutes later, they call the musician over, and they request the Katusha, which Russia has named rockets after. It's a highly patriotic Russian song. This is the equivalent of the German Reich song in the corner of Rick's bar. And the musician begins to wind it in. I said to Andrea, what is that? She says, it's from a Russian composer. We knew they spoke Russian by that time. Andrea told us. It claws in the ear for her. And she says, it's the Katusha. And he had requested the Katusha as an answer to our Ukrainian song. This was now a war of sheets of music. But it's not something I noticed until reviewing the film just a few days ago. The musician played the Katusha, but he played it to us and put his back on the Russian. And when he was done, he did one more thing. He gave the Russian a bonus song. Isaac Coley, the second most patriotic song in Ukraine. He got a twofer. And it was, I think the Russian took it as a slight. As soon as it was done,
they were not happy.
No, you saw them bend their back to them. Could you describe their faces?
Angry.
It's hard to say. They were just really not happy.
They were unhappy.
Yeah, it was.
Not happy, which is much worse than unhappy. No, they really were.
Yeah.
And they threw they got up from the table when he was done, and they started adjusting their clothing, and they had paid their bill, and they threw their jackets on, and they stormed out of the cafe. And it was over. Next.
It's nice when the trash takes itself out of the room.
I won't say that, but I heard that from the peanut gallery. very serious stuff. In case you're wondering what you're looking at, she's in a Russian fur hat. The other person is in a cat face, and I'm in a tinfoil hat with a point on it. There may have been some amount of alcohol. These are volunteers. These are volunteers, and it's important to remember that you can truly be protected from 5G if you wear a tinfoil hat. Now, that was my idea of a defensive Russian hat in the war. And we need to remember to laugh sometimes. Every day is a good day with friends. Oh, and this is our 15 minutes of frame. I'll share something right afterwards. We'll do questions.
Ужгороді, Києві, Коломиї, Одесі та в Сумах.
Кеннес Дікий Гловер, екскурсовод-дослідник зі США, перелічує міста України, в яких разом зі своїм товаришем Джозефом побував з часу повномасштабного вторгнення. Ці двоє товаришів кожного місяця зі своєї зарплатні заощаджують, аби зібрати кошти для мандрівки Україною. І приїздять в Україну чоловіки не з пустими руками.
Ми відчували, що ми мали зробити щось для України. Не могли залишитись осторонь цих подій, що відбуваються в Україні. 2018 року ми побували в Україні, нам тут сподобалось. А коли почалася війна, ми знову вирішили відвідати Україну. Потрапили в Мукачево, де познайомились з волонтерами. І нас дуже зворушило те, як люди об'єднані навколо перемоги. Вирішили теж долучитися. Всі кошти на подорож – це наші власні гроші. Я працюю у компанії доставка, мій товариш – гід. Вдома ми збираємо донати від небайдужих американців. 100% донатів ідуть на допомогу. Зазвичай збираємо кошти. І вже на місці в Україні з допомогою волонтерів закуповуємо все необхідне.
Чоловіки активно стежать за соцмережами, спілкуються з волонтерами, військовими, шукають тих, кому потрібна підтримка. Під час крайнього візиту чоловіки побували у Сумах, Коломиї та Закарпатті. І на майже 10 тисяч доларів.
It was nice to be on TV, 4 different channels, and it meant that many Ukrainians got a personal interest story that told them that people in the United States still care. Yeah. And I'm really happy that they say, can we film you packing in the hotel room? I said, oh God, Joseph, we're going to clean up. Joe said that to me, we're going to clean up. And stuff is all over the place. And there's the airplane, it has to be in everything, you understand. And but I was so glad the hotel room was a really basic hotel room with very small beds and nothing fancy, because people in Ukraine will see the film. I thought it would have been a terrible optic if we had found a fancy place. People got to realize that we travel economy. Oh yeah, sometimes we go to the New York Cafe. It's got a lot of money, that's different. That turn is a place on the way to the front, and there I'm showing the plane. And one of the other films, they dubbed me, and I really love my deep Ukrainian voice. Joseph's voice is also awesome. Oh, but how did we make it look so good? TV magic. The night before, we packed everything, and then I packed 2 strategic bags that we laid out in the beds after we made them, opened them up, and unpacked a few items to pack again when the camera is there. TV magic. And we got interviewed, by the way. Maybe it's ingracious, but we were released from an organization for not full cooperation. So what do you do when you get fired? Go on TV. It's okay, we're still in relationship. Just because there's a bump in the road doesn't mean that the people that we serve there get hurt. The Pickering Family Legacy, words by Tibor Tompa, head of the Ukrainian-Hungarian community of Kyiv, who has given Joseph and I a great amount of assistance, as has the Pickering Foundation, and the Friends of Broad Street Cemetery, and Hamilton Hall, and also this local community. And it's not just money, it's words of encouragement and interest. So I'll let he speak for himself. 1, 2, 3.
Hi.
1, 2, 3.
Hi, my dear friend, Tibor from Ukraine. Thanks for your invitation.
thank Mr. Vijay Jones that it's possible visit here Pickering House, and I'd like to tell you an interesting history about influential role Pickering family for modern astronomy in Ukraine. One of the greatest discovery in variable star, which was discovered in maybe 10 years ago by Ukrainian astronomer Alexander Baransky, thanks to Mr. Pickering, William Henry Pickering, famous American astronomer, who provided a special method how to research variable star in the universe. Mr. Baransky used this special, interesting and unforgotten method from William Henry Pickering and opened and blustering new star name of Corona Borealis. And this Mr. from Ukraine, Ukrainian scientist, expressed his gratitude for Pickering family, because thanks for Pickering's family, he could open a new type of variable star. Thanks.
As Tibor Tapa, thanks to the Pickering Foundation, he was able to get a visa to go to this country for 2 years. He's a businessman, excuse me. It's the weight of history in this house. It makes one cough occasionally. Could be the dust in books. But he was here, and but he couldn't align his schedule with us. He's in California, and I want you to know that he says the people in California are entirely different from New England. I think we may find that to be true. I'd like to share one thing. Oh, is there anything else, or is that
No, I
it?
think it's just the thank you slide. So, I'll put
1, 2, 3.
I'll put that on.
There it is. That's everything I said there. It has been said most people want to give advice, but few people want to give assistance. We are especially grateful to those who've been interested in our humanitarian work in Ukraine. We thank you. The Pickering Foundation, Hamilton Hall, the Friends of Broad Street Cemetery. With particular gratitude also to the following people. I had a list of 50 people, and then I realized no one's going to read that. Charlie Stepanek, Carolyn Ross's father, retired military, came up to me before we did any humanitarian. Well, I'd done a little bit. We went there for 4 days and met with people for a few hours. But I came back from the trip, and he came up to me one day and he says, here, it was an envelope from his daughter, $260. This is for your humanitarian work in Ukraine. That was the first I ever heard of it. It was the first. Linda Deanie Jenkins, who had me, and Tim Jenkins had me here at the Pickering House when she was executive director. PJ Joyce, who's executive director of the Pickering House, who has me here.
He wants something.
Thank you. The way to history. Kathleen Wooten, who's given up a hockey game to be here today. Very big. Molly Wooten, her daughter, who's at the hockey game. I told Kathy it's going to be the best hockey game in history. Ukrainian friends, our local community, thank you from Joseph and me. If I just add one thing, I think it's sort of out of context, but I'd like to share something. I want to tie it in, all of this, what we did to this house. Believe it when I tell you that I take inspiration from the history of Salem's greater moments, particularly Colonel Timothy Pickering, who was a general but will always be known as a colonel. And Colonel Timothy Pickering wrote a letter to Thomas Jefferson. I have, for the very second trip to Ukraine, told people when I was in Ukraine, when I wanted to speak to people to a group, I would remind them that Ukraine is already in possession of liberty. Those are not my words. Timothy Pickering had said it in 1806. Yeah, I just checked it there. 1806, that Haiti is already in possession of its liberty. And there should not be an embargo act against Haiti that makes it difficult to protect their democracy. They have already won and developed. And but Thomas Jefferson squarely came down the side of relations with France. And Timothy wrote him a scathing letter. 24th of February, 1806, to Thomas Jefferson. Did he write that? And I realized that I didn't want to read the whole letter, so I only put down a portion. You're very welcome. Are the hapless, the wretched Haitians, guilty indeed of a skin not colored like our own, but emancipated, and by great national act declared free, after enjoying freedom many years, having maintained in it arms, resolved to live free or die? Are these men not merely to be abandoned to their own efforts, but to be deprived of those necessary supplies which for a series of years they have been accustomed to receiving from the United States, and without which they cannot subsist? And are they to be thus deprived, not by the operations of an enemy with whom they wage war, but by the direct agency of a neutral power? All the world knows, sir, that the Haitians, though declared revolted subjects of France, are in actual possession of independence. Those are the words that have inspired me from the beginning, in possession of independence. Never say that in a talk. Makes you sound not very smart. Not terribly bright either. I got a text, could end on this, December 21st, 2024, from Kevin Rodham, a humanitarian aid worker we meet in Ukraine. He's in England at the time. I don't need to tell you that Ukraine is now a very dangerous place, much more than your last visit. So please, plan everything with military precision. I have a philosophy which I use. If it does not look right or does not feel right, do not do it. Trust only the face you shave on the morning with all of your plans and itinerary. He strongly urged Joseph and I to stay off of Facebook and not tell people of our itinerary, even friends. Only Andriani says, only trust her. And so we were there one day, we're in a cafe, and a woman I never met before, who's translating for a woman I have met, in a cafe with strangers, says, out of the blue, I had not brought it up. And it was an honest question. Are you going to the east, which means the front? We had not been yet. And so I thought about it, and I went, where are you going to the east? I thought about it, and I went, I asked where? And I said, I know, but you can read about it after the fact. You can trust me. I know. I can't trust everyone else in the cafe. It's a scary time. Arturo told me a story when he was fighting in the front of a poor woman with children who would come by every day for some of their rations because they were all hungry. And every day she came, the soldiers gave them some of their food. One day she came and did the same, got the food, and Arturo, who's very adept, he noticed that she slipped out of her pocket a cell phone, and she thought no one was looking, and threw it in another pile of trash and walked away. She had been paid by the Russians to drop a cell phone so they could target Arturo and the other soldiers, the women they fed every day. The Russians find desperate people to do their work. or calling coordinates. So when we went to the front, we put our phones in silence, airplane mode, took off location. The other thing that you have to take off, tracking, because we didn't want our cell phone signals to be used to target the van. And there was one night I was sitting in the balcony of our hotel room looking out at our van that was parked in the street, wondering if there should be stickers all over it that identify us if someone might not put a bomb under it. That probably may not have been reality, but it was my reality at the moment that we had to be careful and we had to rely on our friends. I feel like if I say this last thing, I'm done and you can have questions. This is an icon. Some of you may have seen it before. A woman gave this to me in Borodyanka, near Kyiv. And her apartment building, very massive apartment building, it was bombed out in the center at the beginning of the invasion. And she told me on one of our early trips, she came up to me, she had this simple woman, not dumb, I mean simple, unaffected. And this is one of the few possessions that survived from her apartment. They had bombed out a 60-foot section of the middle of the apartment building and told people if they dug through the rubble for our friends, they would shoot them. And we got talking, and she was not a beggar. A religious woman, unaffected. And she didn't want me to take a picture because she was embarrassed of the way she looked. I said, "You look beautiful." This is something that transcends, and even what we don't think is beautiful can be beautiful in someone else's eye, in a not a romantic way. And so I did take her picture, and Joseph, and I gave her some money, and then Joseph, I'm going to match that. And it was $100 because she'd been talking about the Colorado beetle. I love Americans. I've never met one until the two of you, but I don't care for your Colorado beetle that attacks my potato crop. We gave her $100. We went back. We asked for her. But Tiber on the last trip says, "I have an update for you." The woman you gave $100 to for chemicals for her potato crop, she got those chemicals. And her plot of potatoes grew enough potatoes to feed 2 families for 1 year. That's some of the simple things we do. I could do none of it without Joseph. Sometimes I feel very much like the front person, that he pushes me to the front to talk. He's the planner. Thank you. Thank you.